Good afternoon, LEC community. Thank you so much for being with us on another edition of Ask an Educator. I know I say this every week. I say I'm so excited because, but like, not that I'm not excited of the work weeks, but I'm super excited because we have someone so amazing, and you're gonna see, but at the end of the show, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, that was dope. The one of the most dope people I know. We have Noemi Cortes with us today. Noemi, how are you?
Good, good. That's a great way to introduce me. I don't know if I can live up to it though.
I mean, I think our viewers will agree after they hear your leadership story and what you have to share with us. You meet good peoples along the way, and you're good peoples. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah. Back at you, girl.
I actually just said that, so then you'd say it back. So, no, I mean, just to kind of get us started off, tell us about yourself, where you're from, who you are, what you do.
Yes. So originally from Chicago, born and raised in Chicago. My peoples are from the south side of Chicago, specifically McKinley Park. It's an interesting place here in Chicago because where we are situated is not where most Puerto Ricans actually live in Chicago. So people very rarely know that there's a ton of Puerto Ricans that live on the south side of Chicago. So that makes for a very different kind of experience. I actually went to school in Michigan and then from there moved to Arizona. So Arizona is where I grew up professionally, I guess you could say. And then I moved back here to Chicago probably about 9 years ago now, when I realized that taking that flight home every time there was a problem was just too much. So I had to leave and came here and started working in education here. So total 22 years in education now. So hopefully I don't look it though.
I don't know if you get that a lot, but you really don't. You don't look it. You do not, like, I would not guess that you would be, the age where you could have done education for 22 years. You look great.
Yes, it was good genes, good genes.
It must be. It must be. Go ahead and sprinkle some of that over here. So you moved back to Chicago. Did you teach? You taught for a time in Arizona, right?
I did. So I taught in Arizona. I was a dual language teacher. Interestingly enough, I didn't actually want to become a teacher. I have to be honest. I actually joined Teach for America initially to become a teacher because I was one of the first people on my mom's side of the family who I spent most of my childhood growing up with. I was one of the first ones to graduate from college, and I just didn't know how to navigate. So I was getting ready to graduate a double major, but no job. I had no idea what I was going to do. And besides, what do you do with a sociology and Latino studies major? Like, what job do you get? So there was lots of advertising for Teach for America. And so when I joined, they weren't here in Chicago at that time. So they shipped me off to Phoenix, Arizona, which I was hella upset about. But when I got there, the reason why was because Arizona was desperately looking for bilingual teachers. And so I was asked to teach a dual language class, a third grade class, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was expected to teach all in Spanish, and I was like, y'all, my Spanish ain't that great that like I can actually teach all day every content in Spanish. But they were so desperate, they were like, close enough. So we did, I had some great mentors when I came in, but I'll be honest, I didn't think it was right to teach kids in Spanish and to only teach in Spanish. I was definitely, in my own experience, like English was meant to be the only language of instruction. Spanish was meant to be stamped out. And so that was like I remember just being with my mentors and being like, what are we doing? Isn't this a disservice? Like, how is it that this is going to help our kids actually do better in school? And they were like, look, it'll be fine. Like, just trust us. It'll be fine. And they gave me all these tools and resources. By the end of the year, I was sold. I was like, right, like doing it any other way is asinine. Like, we have to maintain our language. We have to maintain our culture. We have to maintain these practices. So I was a dual language teacher pretty much all of my career in teaching. And then I went into administration. Now in Arizona is a special place. Do you know anything about Arizona? It's a special kind of place.
Just a little bit.
It's a special place. In Arizona, the year after I got there, they passed an English only policy. And what that meant was that it was illegal for people to teach in Spanish or in any language, really, except for at the time they made the exception for indigenous languages. But it made it illegal to teach in Spanish. And so that literally what I was doing suddenly became illegal. After like I became a believer, it was suddenly illegal to do it. And within a couple of years, they had finally put practices behind the policy, which for anyone who doesn't know, that's usually how it works. So the policy will pass, and it'll take some years for there to be an interpretation of the policies for what practices you should be doing in your classrooms or in your school districts. So a couple years later, when practices started to come out from the Department of Ed, I was now suddenly an administrator, and I was supposed to oversee the transition away from dual language into this other program that I did not believe in, structured English immersion. I was like, fuck that. I'm not doing that. Like, if y'all pulled me into this role to actually like implement something I don't believe in for my people, like, nope, it ain't going down. And so it was a real, like, my early career was actually a lot of like battles around how do we maintain dual language education for our families and our kids. So that probably wasn't your question, but that was how
No,
I started out my career in education.
that's actually where I was going with it, because I knew you had started teaching in Arizona, and I knew you had this great, like, great is the wrong word, but this insight into what teaching at that time looked like, that not a lot of us have had. If anything, I mean, our book club is lessons for centering the voices and experiences of bilingual Latinx students, so
Mhm.
your experience in Arizona, and I mean, using the word illegal feels como like, ooh, but it literally was illegal
Oh
to
yeah.
teach in Spanish and to teach, so our dual immersion languages, I mean, schools would be non-existent, right? And then
Right.
ELL as a program, did that go away?
I mean, so that's the interesting part, right? So the a lot of my early work was finding the loopholes, right? So so one of the things they did, the reason why it was illegal, like literally as an individual teacher, you could be sued and your certification revoked if it was found that you were actually teaching in a language other than English. But there was a couple of loopholes, and so we actually, as a district, because I was like, I'm not doing it. We found ways to actually maintain our dual language program. At one point, we were one of 3 in the entire state of Arizona that was still happening after this law passed. Before that, there was something like 20 something schools that had offered the dual language as an option for our Spanish speaking families. And so then you go into this space of like, there's got to be a loophole. There's always a loophole. There's always a loophole in a policy, right? This is what white supremacy has always done. They've found ways to make laws work for them, even though that's not how the law was, necessarily written. But this time it worked in my favor because I was like, the law was written in a very particular way. And the way that the Department of Education was interpreting the policy, I was like, oh, okay. So as long as I can meet this expectation here around whether or not people fill out this form correctly, then it's like, okay, so I just need to be more vigilant on how people fill out this home language survey that they have to fill out when they first go in, which was a huge thing, right? Because we all know when families fill out that home language survey, a lot of times kids are getting misidentified. So we have kids who are coming in being identified as bilingual students or as Spanish-speaking students or any other language for that matter, when they don't even speak the language. They have no clue how to use that language. But because Abuelita is at home and she speaks it sometimes with the kids and the parents filled out the form that way, then all of a sudden we're testing this child. This child like is suddenly in our program. They have no idea how to speak any language other than English. And so we just started being more vigilant about that. We developed practices around how to ensure that we didn't do that any longer. We developed practices around talking to families about like, here's what we can do. If you really want to be in the dual language program, here's what we're going to do over the course of this next year. And then once we do that, we can test your child and your child will be able to pass this one little tiny part of the test, which was the loophole. So most people interpreted the policy that it was the entire language assessment that kids needed to demonstrate proficiency in. The law didn't read that way, and it was not interpreted that way. And I was like, right here, there's the loophole. So we exploited it. And we were able to maintain our program, which was like, it was essential for our families and for our kids.
So, I mean, I think we could go on and on about this because we're seeing so many. I mean, we've always seen these things happen to teachers, right? Like it happens to us. All of a sudden, we're told there's this new policy, a new curriculum, etc. Right? But at the moment when that passed, did you all know that like there were groups of people that were going to fight it and it was going to go to Supreme Court? Because did it not end up going to the Supreme Court? The bill?
So that's the funny thing about it. There was a previous case about language immersion programs in the state that had actually happened several years before. And so there was a consent decree. It was called the Flores consent decree. And they were still embattled even during that time. So by the time I became an administrator, it was like 2006, 2007, something like that. And so that court case had still not been settled. The consent decree between the state and the court system essentially like allowed for certain changes to occur. But there were some concerns about like, well, how does this impact then the work that has been trying to be done alongside that consent decree? And so I actually at one point got connected with the lawyer because the lawyer for that particular family was against the policy as well. He actually did believe that it was against the consent decree. And so there was some work being done, and it was right after that actually the case went all the way to the Supreme Court. But then the Supreme Court shot it back and it basically argued that while there are some aspects about it that have to do with language, that really at the end of the day, it was a funding issue. And so funding issues obviously are state-based issues. They aren't meant to be determined at the federal level. So yes, for anyone who doesn't know, right, the Constitution does not protect our right to an education. Those are state-based rights. So there was some conflicts there, but it didn't protect our families, like at the end of the day. In Arizona, is that place where like they kept trying to pass laws that would require people to demonstrate legal residency or legal citizenship. And it was like, there's already case law on the books that protects our families from not having to do that. And in fact, if any district were to do that, like it's actually illegal. And that's a federal protection that our families have. Like individual districts and teachers and schools cannot require our families to have to do anything to demonstrate that they are legally in the United States. And so that was another piece of it, was like, how do we actually maintain those protections? Because the state was still trying to pass legislation in that direction. So, there were a number of us that were definitely working to maintain our programs, or at the very least reject what the state was continually trying to do. Soon after, they passed like an ethnic studies ban that was directly attacking an ethnic studies program. It was actually a Mexican studies program in Tucson, Arizona, which was like, again, another huge battle. Like, I mean, it was all attacks on very specifically immigrants, right? And Mexican and Central and South American immigrants, right? Like, that's who was really there in Arizona. So there was a whole lot of other stuff that came with it. And, dual language programs, it's not just about maintaining the language, but it's also about really instilling in our, and again, it's a lot more than this, but the piece that I was connected to was like, it's not only about maintaining our language, but it was also about really shining a light on our culture, right? So a well done dual language program uses originally written works in Spanish, right? They're not translated, which means they're written by people like us, which was different than I had experienced when I was in school, So
Yep.
it was more than just a matter of like protecting a program. It was like defending all of us in some ways, because that's what was at stake,
Yeah. And I mean, unfortunately, it's an uphill battle, because it's a lot of that is still going on to this day, right? We got Katina with us. Hey.
Hey.
She's been engaging with the things you've been mentioning, right? And she said something super important, right? That's why we must learn to understand policy and legal language and be advocates. We can't be in an education and not be political, right? And then doesn't it tell us a lot that federally the people aren't entitled to an education? I didn't know that. And see, viewers, this is what I told you. Like, you were about to go to school this afternoon with Noemi, because you learn a lot from Miss Cortes. She's got, Katina says, sense of self, culture, and FUBU, which I don't. Katina, tell me more, because
for us, by us.
Okay,
that's some old school. That used to be some old school apparel too.
Yes,
but
I
won't go how far back that was.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, I know the brand, but I like that. For us, by us. Well, you know what? Your Arizona story kind of touched into a lot of the questions I wanted to ask you today. But to kind of backtrack a little bit, or maybe not, right? Maybe you'll tell us something from today, but tell us your leadership story, whatever you want to share. Actually, you were the first leadership story I'd ever heard in like this sense, right? Through Surge, and like it was just so impactful. So of course, whatever your upbringing, your journey as a student, as a teacher, as a professional, what do you credit from where you are now? What's your leadership story?
Ooh, that was actually the first time I ever told my leadership story, at least publicly anyway. So
wow.
Yeah. So I think part of the reason why it came so naturally isn't the word, but like the reason why I was like, I am not going to sit back and allow this policy to destroy a program that I value and that I know matters, is because my entire childhood and my parents actually were activists, right? They were radical activists at that. My father was heavily involved in the Puerto Rican independence movement here in Chicago, and was actually imprisoned for his political beliefs. And so that is, I think, the sort of grounding piece of it all, right? Like, when your father is in prison and you're 5 and all you understand is that you got to walk through these metal detectors and this cop is talking crazy to your mom, and like you're trying to sneak in food because my father isn't able to eat, and like he actually is like on the verge of like having these major like medical issues, and like we can't do anything to support him, and you're aware of this at young of an age, it sets you up in life differently, right? Like, you suddenly understand that one, that like everything is a fight, right? Like in the sense that like nothing is going to come to us unless we actually push and advocate for it. but that the entire system is fucked, right? Like the fact that my father was in prison because of his political beliefs in a country that claims that free speech is like a fundamental right was an oxymoron, right? So everything about what I was learning in schools, everything about what I was understanding about, the United States government was a complete contradiction because of what I was being told in school and what I was actually experiencing at home and what I was being told at home. So a lot of how I understood what it meant to exist in this world was about the fact that like this country was not built for me. It's not actually welcoming me. And so how do I actually stake my claim in it? Because that is what I understood to be necessary. Obviously, because my father was in the Puerto Rican independence movement, it actually meant that I was also like hyper Puerto Rican. Like you can't talk to me and not know that I'm Boricua. Like you're going to find that out within like the first 5 minutes of talking to me. That's just how it's going to go. And it's either going to go because I'm going to say something and I'm going to be like, Mira. And most people are like, oh, that's Puerto Rican. That's how I know you're Puerto Rican. Or it's just going to come out in some other way, right? Like I'm just going to name it for everybody. So being Puerto Rican and being a darker skinned Puerto Rican in a hyper Mexican neighborhood, in a neighborhood that was also transitioning, there was a ton of white flight happening at the same time. There was a lot of also like this recognition of also like my racial identity. I didn't understand what Latinidad really meant other than like Puerto Ricans and Mexicans didn't like each other. We were always going to be fighting. Like that's just how it was going to be. And so that was like that was another part of how I understood who I was like, we actually can't keep this up because the more I actually am embattled with people who look like me, so to speak, right? The less likely it is that we're going to get anywhere. And my father's continuance in the prison system was a constant reminder that like, if we can't figure this shit out and actually like figure out how to come together, despite whatever differences that we can acknowledge we have, like this system isn't built for any of us. And so like they're just going to keep picking us apart. And like all of us are going to end up in places where we don't belong. And the experience in Arizona was just another example of that, right? Like they were picking us off, right? Like they were always highlighting. I was even mad. There one time they highlighted this Puerto Rican woman. I was like, you need to sit down and shut up. Like the idea that like they could find people who look like us to talk about how unimportant it was to maintain who we are, our culture, our language, any part of us, right? Any recognition of us as anything other than American, even though there was nothing about America that was welcoming to us. And so that all was like heavily impactful in how I even understood myself as a person. But I also struggled, right? Like here I was, my mother was doing her best to raise myself and my brother. She was also doing her best to be a great partner to my father. And all that I also saw was just like how my father's struggle, obviously, which clearly was a very difficult and challenging situation for him to have to like live his youth in prison. Like he was in his 20s when he was arrested. To spend that time in prison and to spend 16 years in prison that way meant that my mother also was experiencing struggle. She was trying to maintain her marriage. She was trying to maintain her children's father in their life. And so being able to see just what that love and commitment looks like was also a huge part of how I understood we needed to function in this world. There was a lot of struggle there, right? Like that doesn't come easily when you're 5 trying to figure out like, why is mom crying? And like, where's Poppy? And like, then you're 8 and it's like, so Poppy's in jail. And like, mommy's looked at funny because she's considered a single mom. Like, and we don't have a ton of money and we're trying to figure this shit out. And just all the ways that we got looked at. And it was like, but you never fully, I was aware at an early age, people never fully saw my mother, right? Like who she was, what she was doing, how she was like doing more than just surviving, right? Like doing all that she could to thrive. And so that was like another piece of it was like, even in intense struggle, a lot of times we forget the women who are holding it down, right? Like who are actually the reason why so many of these martyred men are able to do their work is because of the women that held them down at home. And that I think is what shaped a lot of how I taught, why I taught, and why I also like took on battles in education, because I also understood that like it was just in me. I couldn't not respond, right? Like
Yeah.
there was something about that I didn't feel like who I was, because it was never true for me as a child nor as a young adult.
How ironic too that you go to Arizona to teach in this field passes, right? And they're like, I don't think they knew who they was messing with when Noemi came to town. You know? We got some people in the comments with us. Thank you, Dr. Davila. Thank you so much for being with us. He says, thank you. You're making excellent points. We had some issues with the home language survey. That's a big, I hear that come up quite a bit when I'm talking to teachers. And then Katina clarified for me, because, you know, I just need some help sometimes. For us, by us, literature written by us, telling our stories, used as primary sources is key. I love that. And then you're getting lots of love. Wow, respect to your parents for leading the way. What an incredible story from Dr. Clark. Hi, Dr. Clark. We got a question from Katina. You mentioned, you know, we failed to mention the women oftentimes that are behind the movements, and you said male martyrs, right, doing this work. How do you think that impacted your mom as a woman? Katina asks.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it, right? Like, I think part of what I share with my story is, I was burnt out of like movement work by the time I was in college. Like, and my mother was exhausted, like exhausted. She was trying to raise two children. She didn't have a college degree. She had never really held a full-time job. She was hunting for one. We had to move in with my grandparents in order to be able to help her like figure out her financial situation. My mother, I think, I mean, she did all she could, but she also couldn't parent better than she was parented, considering the extreme stress that she was under. As a youth, obviously, I didn't see that, right? Like, which meant that myself and my brother definitely didn't make my mom's job any easier, right? Like, she bore the brunt of my father's imprisonment in a way that I don't think people fully understand what it meant for her to stay married to her high school sweetheart, and to raise children in a context that was impossible. Like, our phones were tapped. Like, I thought it was funny. I thought she was joking, but like, actually, when the shit gets played back to you because they fucked up the recording and like somehow you get to hear yourself talking, you know, like then there's like a weird way that things become normal. And I think that weighed more on her than I think she even will admit to. As do moms, right? Moms do that all the time. They'll carry the weight and the burden in ways that are actually extremely taxing on them, and never actually seek support for what they need. And so that was it was a heavy burden on her. The way that she responded was like, as soon as my father was released, she was like, I'm not working anymore. You go get a job. Like, she was like, I'm out. That's it.
Yep.
You know, and initially that was, you know, there was some tension there, but it was like, I get it. You're fucking tired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned quite a bit that we could classify as hurdles, right? Like, upbringing, you know, your dad, and I mean, a lot of discord, right? A lot of just running up against hurdles, running up against walls, and it lends to the person you are today, though. And I mean, what I would do to be a fly on the wall in your classroom, you know, or a student sitting in one of your classrooms, I might have to hunt one of them down or something and see and learn more about how you were as a teacher. But Kind of speaking of hurdles, um, whether it be in your upbringing or accessing, college and school or career, what's a hurdle that you've had to overcome in order to be where you are today?
Yeah, man. Look, there are very distinct memories. I distinctly remember in eighth grade in Chicago, we have selective enrollment schools, which means they're like the best high schools in the city. Um, I distinctly remember being in the stairway, my mom asking, because we didn't have computers back then, it wasn't like easily accessible. That wasn't a thing. So she was asking him for a copy of an application to the high school. We're standing in the stairway, and this old ass white dude, and he looks at me and he looks at my mom, and he was like, "What do you need the application for? She's just going to be pregnant and working as a maid by the time she's 16 anyway." And of
He said
course,
that.
like,
He said
he
that.
literally said that. Like, I'm standing right there. Said it to my mom. Like, neither one of us existed, and he just was speaking out of turn. Um,
And who was
but
this
I,
person
I
with? Like a school leader or a teacher?
he was a school principal. He was the principal. The principal. The gatekeeper, because again, computers
Wow.
weren't a thing. So like you had to either get it from, you were supposed to be able to get it from your elementary school, the application. If not, you would have to make your way over to the high school itself. And so my mom, being who she was, right, like she also ain't gonna take shit laying down, right? Like again, another thing I learned from my parents. I did get the application. We figured it all out, right? But like, what does that say about my context then? Which was then coupled with several months later, I'd had surgery on my wrist, so I wasn't able to go to school. It wasn't the best school. We weren't exactly the best kids. I was the best kid. I had great grades. I was a teacher's pet. Shut up. Don't make fun of me. Like, I know I was a good kid. I did all my reading, even though I didn't really read, but I was reading more than a lot of other people. Like, but anyway, I mean, the point being, like, I was a really good student. And I distinctly remember I got my report card and I had a D in music, and I was like, what the fuck? Mr. Hall, racist ass motherfucker. Nobody liked him. So we all treated him like shit because he was so, I mean, he would say things to us that was like unacceptable by all stretch, but anyway, and so my mom fought it, like she was like, why does she have a D? Like, this fool doesn't give out work. He didn't, like, nothing. But all of a sudden, while I was out from school because of my wrist surgery, all of a sudden he supposedly gave homework and I didn't do it. And so because I didn't do this work, I had a failing grade in the class. And she was like, I mean, we matched it up, right? Like, we had all the information, we had the doctor's note and like all this stuff. The principal, because he was an asshole, Mr. Laz, he was like, no, she keeps her D. Several months after that, the science teacher, Bochinchera, she was like always just sitting around trying to get all the cheesemen from the middle schoolers, calls me out and she's like, hey, Noemi. She was like, did they already tell you you're going to be valedictorian? I was like, what? Like, all this work, all this time of like trying to be a good kid and like all that shit, what? And she was like, oh, wait. Oh, no, you're not going to be a valedictorian. She was like, you got a D in music, right? And I was like, oh, yeah, I did. And she was like, oh, that's right. You can't be the valedictorian. And they
Stop.
gave it to the white kid. There was like 4 white kids in the whole damn school. They gave it to the white kid. I was like, all right, people, here we are. That was just middle school. Don't get me started on all the versions of how that came out in high school, in college, like all kinds of ways that I just, people wanting to silence me, people wanting to put things in front of me. I had a college TA once who pulled me aside and was like, Mimi, I'm gonna need you to not talk in class. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, you don't want me to talk in the discussion? class? He was like, well, you're kind of scaring some of the students.
No.
I'm scaring the students? Are you talking about that white man that was upset because I told him he couldn't label himself African American just because he was from Africa? Like, we should actually have a conversation about that. Not the fact that he got scared and walked out of class because I called him on it. That's not how that went. So, needless to say, that's the stories I bring into my classroom.
Yeah. And I have a lot to say. I have a lot to break down because, first of all, okay, again, Dr. Dawla is with us. What's sad is that in many places it still continues. We do need to advocate for each other. And Dr. Davila said that after you talked about the principal, it talked about, you getting pregnant and being a maid. I was having a conversation last night with some friends, and I said, a lot of our kids' school experiences are subjective to the teacher, right? And so that D, for example, right? If you had a different teacher, had you gotten that D, right?
Right.
Like, let's say even if it did come down to some assignments, let's just say, right?
Right.
There are the kind of teachers who are going to say, look, if you have it in before July 5th, we good,
Right.
and then there are some teachers who are like, nope, you were out because you had wrist surgery. I don't know what to tell you. You missed, right? And so, like, that's what's so difficult about parenting, in the school system.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell my
Mm-hmm.
sister and her kid, like, I'm like, it's subjective to what school your kids go to, who their teachers are, who the school leader is, and then the TA, right, and your college experience. Like, I mean, for some of us, that would have been debilitating, right? Like the straw on the camel's back, where we're like, I'm out. Like, this is too much. But 50% of Latinos drop out of college after the first semester.
Mm-hmm.
It's not surprising when you hear that some of them are going to college and being
Right.
told stuff like what you said, right? And so,
Right.
um, the hurdles you mentioned are unfortunately the hurdles that maybe are all too familiar for people listening. But unfortunately, to this day, like Dr. Davila said, for some of our students.
Right. And I think that's the piece, right? Is that like, as Katina mentioned earlier, right? Like we also need to understand the policies at play, right? So like my mom didn't know at the time that she actually could have advocated for me beyond the principal, right? Like she didn't know that. But like that is actually, while that can be a school-based decision, you can actually take that above the principal's head. And most of the time, most districts, no matter how big they are, I worked here at CPS, like in Chicago Public Schools, no matter how big they are, nobody wants to hear from a parent at the district office. They're just like, what do you need? How do you need this to be solved? Let me go ahead and contact the principal and like this needs to be settled. Nobody wants to deal with that shit because nobody also wants to deal with what comes of parents rising up in resistance to that kind of treatment. So, she didn't know that she could have taken it further, right? One thing that I've learned in being in the system is like, yeah, no, actually, parents have so many more rights than they realize, right? Like the home language survey, right? Like the fact that parents fill it out don't recognize what it actually means for their child, especially for children who don't have a language other than English that they speak. Like that's just a matter of educating parents on how it is they can advocate for themselves to get that shit changed, right? But like sometimes we just take things for face value, in part because we don't realize or we don't understand the way the broader system works. So part of like the advocacy on the teacher's end, or like for those of us who are working outside of the schools and maybe doing other work like the LEC, part of it is just like, let me tell you about what this home language survey is, how it works, and what you actually need to do when you fill it out, right? I don't know, there's probably somebody watching right now, right? Like I didn't put out my home language survey that my kids speak Spanish because I already know what that means for them,
Yeah.
right? So like, did I lie on it? Sure. And I did it because I know what was best for my kids.
And that is so I mean, that right there, you knowing that is so complex. Like, you wouldn't know that unless you're a teacher, unless you're an educator and you see what happens after that parent survey hits the
Right.
secretary's desk and hits the administrator's desk, right? Like, you don't know that. And some families, like, I might put down, yep, we're bilingual because we're proud of it, right? Like, yep, we speak Spanish at
Mm-hmm.
home. My kid knows two languages, without
Yeah.
knowing what happens after that survey, right?
Right.
This actually happened in my family where my nephew moved to one of the um, suburban schools. You know, it's a little less
Mm-hmm.
diverse. And she called me and she said, "Hey, Jose is being referred for ELL." And she's like, "What's up with that?" And I was like, "Well, is he struggling in class? Like, is he struggling to keep up? Is he no, because he's known English since the time he was born, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't know what's going on." And she's like, "The only thing I can think of is this survey that I took, and I put that he speaks Spanish and English. That's the only way they would know he's bilingual, because it's not like he's speaking Spanish in class, right?" And I said,
Right.
"Bingo." I said, "Go up there, and tell them, like,
Mm-hmm.
my kiddo doesn't necessarily need those supports." We got Marisol with us. Hi, Marisol. She says, "Yes, no, you're right. She would, what I mean. Power to the people, civil rights." And back to into the surveys, she says, "Yes, and into the trenches of those surveys, and how to train and advocate." That training, I mean, advocating is a whole nother, like, level. You have to really get there to even be
Right.
trained to understand what it means, what it's for, how is it tied to funding,
Mm-hmm.
versus, like, legitimate, like, you know what I mean?
Right. Right. Right.
I mean, yes, yeah, you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah. I
um,
mean, like, and especially like I mean, so in larger districts, like even following the money, right? Like, so that money, interestingly enough, in Chicago public schools, schools that have populations of students who are identified as English language learners, like the amount of money that a school gets is irrelevant to the broader budget. So for an individual principal here in Chicago to be arguing that like somehow we're going to get more money from it, that's actually a lie, because there actually isn't that much money tied to it. Where the money goes is to the district office, right? It was true in my case. I bet anybody who's on a district level here that works with the language acquisition department, right? Like that is what is actually more true, is that that money is actually housed at the district level to be able to provide and siphon out supports to families, right? Or to students. But even then, those supports, because you're spread so thin, those supports actually don't do much, right? Unless you're being intentional about what you're doing, which is why it mattered to us that, like, so one of the things that we had to pay attention to in Arizona was like, one, the sort of frontline people were the clerks and the secretaries. They needed to be the first ones trained, right? Like not the teachers even. Like I could tell the teachers, sure, but half the time they didn't even get the language survey to even know. They just got the label and that was it. Or somebody showed up to your room. I bet you remember this. Somebody shows up to your room. I got a test so and so today, and it's like, testing for what? What test you giving? Like what's happening right now?
how long are they going to be gone?
Right? Are you right now? Right now you gotta do it. Like so I mean, like there's the in terms of like who we actually think about who really is like the person to train, it really is that front office staff and helping them to understand like who is the service really for and who is it that we're really trying to make sure that we provide the kind of supports that are necessary. Because then that way the teachers who actually provide those supports, which you're going to be obligated to provide supports, can actually center their attention on the kids who need those supports. Because just yes, is language learning, I mean, I'm sorry, is our language learning pedagogies absolutely what should be part of every single classroom? Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. Those are just good practices around helping kids develop oral language and just oracy in general, right? Like, yes.
I was
And
just going to say that. Like, we're also not saying, like, ELO programs are bad and, like,
right,
schools,
right,
like,
right.
no. Like, but just making sure that we're not putting the wrong kiddos in those on those tracks.
Right, right. Because then all the things that get connected to that, right? Like I mean, and these are just practices more broadly that districts need to address, but it's like, you know, in one of our schools, the kids got tracked. It's like, why the fuck are we tracking our kids? Like now all of a sudden, all these kids are like siphoned into the classroom with the special education teacher because like, well, she can provide more supports to them because she knows special education, you know, tactics. And it's like, we're not we're not learning disabled because we speak another language. Like we are
Wow.
just trying to learn a new language, right?
Right.
Like,
We're getting ready to add on to the list of languages that we know, you know, like
right,
it's not a bad thing.
right.
Marisol's witches, she says the money, the flow of the money sells it all.
Mhm.
Executive fees, I mean, she's going in.
Mhm,
Salaries, insurance,
mhm.
contract,
Yep, yep, there it is. Yep. Mhm.
and then she says, "Preach, Noemi, you are my spirit new bestie." I told y'all, when you're gonna have Noemi on, you gotta be ready because it's gonna be all about the real. So all of these things kind of unfortunately lend to a number that we just got done releasing at the LEC. The reports we released was the second of our reports this year, research this year. It was all about pathway programs, and particularly in Missouri and Kansas, how many Latinx people are enrolled, how many are graduating. And so earlier this year, we learned that in the Kansas City Metro, there are only 261 Latinx educators. That's one for every 200 students. And then now we've learned that there are, in 2019, only 650 Latinx people graduated out of teacher programs in the whole state of Kansas and Missouri. So 650 sounds like a lot, but it is up against, I think it was 25,000 total, 25,000 total. And so these numbers are just like proof after proof after proof that um, number one, those of us who are going into education aren't staying very long, leaving after an average of 3 years. And then we're not even choosing it as a career, which, you know, enrollment in teaching in education is dwindling anyway, and it has been for a long time.
Right.
But the numbers are much more somber for Latinos. What advice, you know, we have Latino educators listening right now. What advice would you give to a Latinx educator or to educators that are feeling the pressure and the discord, like, you know, the discord that you've run into? What's something you would say?
Yeah, so I mean, so I stayed in education, so in schools, districts, so directly in the schooling system for 19 years. And I think what kept me going was the reminder that this work wasn't directly about the broader system, right? Like I had to pay attention to who the students were that were in front of me. So I think it probably sounds crazy coming from me, but like where I centered was always with my students and my families. Because if I tried to focus on how terrible, you know, some of the principles I had were, if I tried to focus on all the politics happening around me, if I tried to focus on like even like trying to figure out how to change the practices of the teacher next door, that's what was draining most of the time. And so yes, I would expend energy that way, right? Like when the teacher across the hall from me a couple years back, you know, I'm sure he ain't listening, but he said some shit to our girls, and I was like, nah, Papa, I need you to reel that in. You don't talk to our girls like that, you know, like, so it wasn't that I wasn't addressing that, but like where I really tried to center was like, what's happening with my students? Am I actually making the impact I want to make? And that's what gave me energy. That's what gave me life. Like, I actually, if I didn't have two really young children, I would still be teaching middle school social studies right now because that was like the most fun I'd had in education um, since leaving the classroom several years back, you know? So, I mean, like, you got to pick your battles. You got to figure out what is it that you're really going to advocate for. You can't advocate for everything, right? Like, you can't be sitting there fighting the fight on the home language survey and fighting the fight on sanctuary cities and fighting the fight on like how it is
Yeah.
we're going to actually dismantle this grading system. Like you can't fight all that. So where's your center? As I got older and like I could attack things faster and easier. It got easier for me to be like, nah, like, Papa, you can't be talking to our girls like that. And you over there, you can't be talking to the boys like that. And like, you over there, we need to change your practices. Like, let's talk, you and me, about how we're going to do this different, because that's not working no more, right? Like, and it became easier just because I had so many more tools. But by far, the grounding force was also like, who were my people?
Yeah.
I had people I could go to in LEC, right? Like, I had a group of other people who were like me, who I could just be like, blah, let me tell you all the dumb shit that happened today. And they were like, girl, I feel you. And like, what you gonna do tomorrow?
We're gonna come back. We're gonna not sleep enough
Right.
tonight, and then we're gonna get up because we got a grade in the morning, and then we'll be back.
Right. And get you an older person too, you know, like a veteran teacher can also help you decipher. Like, you're spending all that time figuring out the prompt for the fucking formative assessment. How about you just don't give the formative assessment? Like, maybe this isn't the thing to do right now. Like, you're spending all this time grading the students and trying to figure out, you know, what kind of feedback you're going to give them. Mama, let's bring it back. Like, let me help you figure out how to do this in a more efficient way. Like, get you an older teacher mentor that can really help walk you through, like, what's all trash, like what's all the cacophony of shit that actually isn't worth paying attention to. So
You said a couple of things. Well, first of all, let me lean on that for a second, because almost in every Ask an Educator show, the educator will say, "Get you a mentor, get you someone who you can lean on, who will help pull you up, who will help check you, help support you." I remember one time I was super overwhelmed, and I went to a different teacher's classroom, and I said, "I can't look at my to-do list." Da, 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 da. And one of the things on the to-do list was a bulletin board, changing the bulletin board. She's like, "Look, in the grand scheme of like this list, is it going to be the end of the world if the principal knows you didn't change the billboard by the beginning of the month? No, folks, let's take that one off the list," right? So like having people who can bring you down. But you said something else that I don't think is talked about enough. And that's that, if you weren't a mom, you'd still be a teacher. And actually, one of my big reasons for leaving the classroom was that I wanted to go and be a mom. So teachers are leaving the classroom after an average of 5 years. Latinos are 3, but you almost got to ask, like, what happens after those 5 years? So many of us aspire to be mothers, but put so much into our classrooms that it's going to be, at least for me, it was going to be impossible to mother the way I wanted to mother and to teach her the way I wanted to teach her, Tell us a little bit about that, just to kind of wrap it up, like how motherhood kind of plays into this.
Yeah. Nah, girl, you summed it up right there. You took the exact words out of my mouth. That is exactly it. There are absolutely teachers who figure that out and like they end up being phenomenal, or some version of their understanding of what that looks like that they can manage. I just couldn't. I couldn't figure it out. Like I mentioned, I was already, when I got into college, I was already burnt out from all of the movement work. And I never quite found my way back to myself. And I think that that's where a lot of my struggle came in, was like, I didn't have good care practices. I didn't have good models for what that looked like. And so by the time I became a mother, and now I'm back in the classroom doing the exact thing I'd always wanted. I always wanted to be a middle school social studies teacher. Don't judge me. I always wanted to do that.
I'm with it on the middle school. A lot of people hate middle school, but
yeah, look, that was like my shit. That was my shit. I was having fun in my classroom.
Yes. Yeah.
And like I couldn't hang anymore. I just couldn't hang anymore. And I think that's right. Like each person has to figure it out. I remember asking one of the other teachers in my school, I was like, how the hell? She was a great teacher. She had like 3 kids and all of them were such great kids. They were at the school. I was like, girl, how do you do it? She was like, girl, I don't do either one good. And I was like, no, but you do it. She was like, no, girl, I don't do either one of them to my best. She was like, I can only give so much to both. And she was like, so they get half of me. And I was like, fuck.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I want to do that like that.
I know.
It doesn't match like how I want to actually do this work. And so I
Yeah.
had to choose to leave for that reason. But I think the thing that's beautiful about teaching though, right, is like you can always go back,
Mm-hmm.
right? So maybe you did leave and maybe in this season it doesn't work. Like I had a 10-year stint in between the first time I became a teacher and when I went back to being a middle school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's okay to go back. And I think
Yeah.
that's the thing to hold on to is like come back. You can
Yeah.
leave, come back.
Yeah. I think it's just not talked about enough. You know how just that whole concept, right? Like we want to be great teachers, we want to be great mothers. It's hard to do both at once because you put so much. I mean, the way you speak about teaching, the way I know I was a teacher, you put your whole self. Like you're there early in the morning, you're staying late at night, you're
Mm-hmm.
grading on the weekends, your lesson plan. How does that
Mm-hmm.
happen with a kid, right? So,
Yeah.
whole nother can of worms. If Dr. Davila, thanks for being with us. Marisol said La Familia. Yes, absolutely. Dr. Davila, thank you for being with us. And yes, middle school is absolutely the best. I agree with that. Noemi, if you had to leave our community with some final words or thoughts, advice, what would you say?
Mhm. Yeah, the same thing I just said. Like find you your tribe, like find your people. We all need to actually be and heal and exist in community, not by ourselves. So like find the people that are going to sustain you, who are going to love on you, who will be there with you every time you fall and will also help to carry you up. Like that is what I have found to be true absolutely over the course of the last decade. Those are our life givers. And so I think I just left a training. We is wellness, I is illness, is what she said. Janae, I can't remember her last name. And that's what I'm sticking with. Be in we. Be constantly in we.
That is really deep. I love that. I'm not gonna let you go before you see all the love you're getting in the comments. Marisol says, "I believe all the work you ladies have done is to become the best teacher to your practice children, and then your real biological or adopted children, and then in turn become great human beings you taught." I can't. I
Mm,
every interview I gotta tear up a little bit. Marisol knew like I hadn't teared up quite enough yet. Uh, Lexi says,
mm,
"Noemi, you're the realest, and I love listening to your insight and stories. Thank you for everything we do." Agreed, agreed. And Marisol says, "By far the best interview." I told y'all at the beginning, like, oh, y'all better be ready because Noemi's up to bat, and Noemi,
You're a mess.
I appreciate.
Thank you.
I
Thank you,
appreciate
all of you.
you. Yes, we appreciate you. We appreciate you taking the time to give us your insight. And I personally appreciate, your sisterhood, the insight you give to for me as a mother, like we've stayed in touch and all of that insight is
Yeah.
so helpful and beautiful as well. Um, Thank you so much for everything you do and everything you've given to the students and the people you've impacted. And the future people that you and the current people you're going to impact and thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It was really great to be able to do this. I am really grateful to you all for even asking. So thank you. And thank you to everybody out there.
I'll leave you, Noemi, with Marisol says we need another series with you. So what's up? Are we are we creating our own LEC show or what's up?
Mira, as long as everybody can handle me saying Mira and cussing a little, we all good.
Yes, you're right. All right, Noemi, have a good night. We will
All
talk
right,
soon.
bye.
Bye, everyone.